This is Hannibal here, and we're back with part two of our extended career interview with Barry Darsow, who is better known as Demolition Smash, Repo Man, Blacktop Bully, so many great gimmicks. In part one, he discussed his early career in Hawaii, the NWA, Crockett Promotions, and now we're getting into part two, the later part of his career. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, and thanks for having me on again.
Well, the fans are looking forward to it. We ended up just talking about your contract situation with WWE in the last video. When they signed you, by that time, were they already looking to fill the Demolition Smash position, or were they going to bring you in as a different gimmick at first before they decided to switch up Randy Colley?
No, they actually wanted to fill that position, and Bill Eadie was there at the time, and he was a major part of who his partner was going to be, and at the time he was in Japan, and so the Demolition was really no more, but it was waiting for a new partner. And when I quit Crockett Promotions, you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I quit Crockett Promotions, I had about a week or two off, and then Vince McMahon called me up, and he wanted to meet with me. So that I wasn't going up there for anything else. It was just to fill that position.
And what were you told about this Demolition gimmick? Were you aware right from the start that this was going to be a tag team push to the moon?
No, when I first went up there, Vince called me up. I had a limousine, flew up to the office, and I was in one of the offices, and Terry Garvin was the first person I met. We talked a little bit, and then Pat Patterson came in, talked to him a little bit, and then Vince came in, and then I had to sign it was like a non-compete, and I couldn't tell anybody about the gimmick. So when Vince came in, he was, just all three of them were incredibly nice and professional and everything. So they started talking about a gimmick up there that things didn't work out. And at that time, I didn't watch the WWF wrestling or anything. I was, watching Crockett Promotions and all my friends there. So uh, Vince says, I got an idea that we'd like you to come in, and here's what the gimmick looks like. So they brought in an artist, and it had all these pictures of what the Demolition looked like. And they asked me, they said, would you like to be part of that? And I said, definitely, I want to be part of it. I don't know exactly what the name would be or what you want me to do or whatever. And then that's when they came up with, they said, do you know Bill Eadie at all? And I said, yeah, the Masked Superstar. And they said, yes. And he said, do you get along with him? I said, well, I've met him a couple of times, and, some of my really good friends are great friends with his. And they've said nothing but good things about him. And I said, I think him and I would probably get along very well. But I said, I don't know him, like call him up and, hey, this is Barry Darsow, and I'd have to explain kind of who I am. So they said, well, that's good. That's good. So you'd be interested in this. And I said, yes, definitely. When would you want me to start? And they said, well, we'd like to start you like in the next couple of weeks. And I said, oh man, Vince, I said, I'll do that if that's what you want me to, but I really need to take just a little bit of a break. I need to heal my body up a little bit. I need to train and really get in incredible shape, because that first debut I make out there, I want to make a splash. And he says, you know what? I'm glad you said that. I think that's a very smart way to go. And I said, and plus, I'd like to meet with Bill, and I'd like to talk over the gimmick and figure out how we're going to do this. And he's the veteran, and so I really want to learn from him. And Vince says, perfect. So why don't we have you start in let's say 3 months? You sign a contract, and we'll get her going at TV right after WrestleMania. And I said, perfect. So I signed the contract and everything, and I went home, and that was the start of the Demolition.
For Randy Colley, was he upset? According to Bill, I guess you wouldn't have known, but was he upset that he was getting replaced?
Well, you know, I never saw Randy Colley around at that time or anything. So, you know, since we had that break, and he was still at TV doing some other stuff. So eventually I got to see him, and he just said, Barry, you know, more power to you. Good luck to you. And, you know, because he knew he was a professional and he was a great guy. So, you know, I'm sure he was upset because he knew the gimmick was going to be good, but he just knew it didn't work out for him.
And I guess the issue there was too many people recognized him as one of the Moondogs.
Yeah, you know, and when they brought me in from, you know, down in Crockett's territory, the people in the WWF, they didn't watch Crockett's territory, so they didn't know who I was. And, you know, maybe a couple people from Philadelphia or Baltimore or whatever, but, you know, the majority of that territory didn't have a clue who I was.
Yeah, most people, strangely enough, don't know that you were anybody but Smash. A lot of people were even shocked that you were the Russian in NWA when I played the first part of the interview. They were saying they had no idea.
Right, right. Yeah, it's, you know, and then when I changed to be the Repo Man, it was like, there's no way. You know, I got down to like 250 pounds, and I was a completely different person, acted different, acted goofy. And, you know, people would say, yeah, you weren't the Repo Man. Yeah, no, I wasn't, you know, or you weren't the Demolition, you know. So it's kind of funny.
Did you come up with the face paint and outfits too, or was that something WWE Creative Services presented to you?
The outfits were uh, Bill and Randy Colley and The Office. They all had input on that, and it kind of changed. You know, like when I first saw the cartoon pictures that the artist made, it was different than what we finally ended up with. But it was a mask, and it was the steel spikes and the spikes with the pants, and then that outfit with the straps on there. So um, we were the ones that when I went up there, we were the ones that really finally said, "This is what we're going to do," and then it was okayed because it, you know, Vince did want you to be comfortable and wanted you to have input at that time on what you're doing, so you could be the best at what you can be. And I think that's changed a lot now, where they just tell you, here's what you're going to do, and this is it, and this is what you say, and you know, they don't give anybody any creative uh parts anymore. It's like you got somebody else that creates it, and you got to be that guy.
As far as the face paint, were you happy that you were going to have to put face paint on every night? Because that seems like it might be a bit of a pain.
You know, I actually liked the face paint because at the time, really the only one that had face paint on were the Road Warriors in the business, Kabuki. Um, there was really nobody else. So for us, that was kind of a different thing. And both Bill and I, we kind of have baby faces. You know, we don't have the faces where somebody looks. You know, some guys are so ugly they're good looking, and they got a wrestling face or whatever. You know, Bill's a school teacher, and I'm a sales guy, so we kind of have regular faces. So it was kind of nice to put the paint on your face and be a completely different character than what your normal character was. So when we were screaming and yelling and wanting to beat people up and kick people's teeth in and everything, that was a Demolition. That really wasn't Barry Darso. So, you know, putting that on kind of gave me a whole nother persona in, you know, in real life actually. But then when we got to the airport and everything, people didn't know who we were, and we'd be with all the other guys at the airport. You know, they knew who Andre the Giant was and who Fuji was, and, you know, Hulk Hogan and all these guys, but they didn't really know who we were. And it was kind of nice. It was nice.
Yeah, I can imagine you wouldn't want to be bothered by fans constantly at the airport if you're on the road over 300 days a year.
Well, yeah, and back then it was, I mean, it's big now too, but the wrestling fans were fantastic. Everywhere you went, they knew your whole life and everything, and it's nice being in the limelight and everything. But Bill and I really weren't like that. We were kind of normal people with a crazy job, and we were different people. It's almost like, I think there was a movie out one time when there was a school teacher that at night he was a wrestler and he wore a mask, and that was Bill and myself.
They started you off with luscious Johnny Valentine as your manager, or with Johnny Valiant, sorry, and it changed to Mr. Fuji. What was the reasoning for changing up the managers?
Yeah. So when we first had the gimmick, the Demolition, Vince told us that we want you two guys to be the two toughest son of a guns in the world, but you need to be able to work with everybody. And he never mentioned, the Road Warriors, how they worked or how Hulk worked or anything. He says, it's you guys. You're two big, huge, strong people who just beat people up, and that's what your gimmick's going to be, but work with people. He says, and I'm going to put you with Johnny Valiant, Johnny V, and he's going to be your manager. So both of us knew Johnny. We thought, oh, this is going to be a great, great deal. Well, once we had Johnny for our manager, he started, he was Johnny V. He didn't do anything for us. He did it for himself, and that's what a lot of the managers did. They were the boss, and you were their employees. So that's kind of how he did it. And he was more on his interviews joking and doing things like that instead of being, I got the baddest team in the world. He'd have a joke about it. So after doing a TV or two and being in some house shows, we noticed that it was kind of like we were a joke, kind of. It wasn't like it was a serious thing where people thought we were going to go in there and just kick some people's butts. So we went to, we told Johnny, we said, Johnny, with your gimmick, we uh, we don't feel like we're the Demolition, and we're gonna go to Vince and see if we can, work something out. And Johnny V said, hey, I totally understand. He says, I don't want to change my gimmick, and you don't want to change your gimmick. So we went to Vince and said, Vince, we talked to Johnny, and we need to change managers to make us look like we're tougher. You know, he's making jokes and everything. We don't need any of that. So then Vince says, well, I got the perfect guy. And he says, we're going to put Fuji with you, and we're going to make him beat on you. We're going to have him hit you with canes. We're going to have him, uh, because he's vicious, and, kids are scared of him. So he says, how do you feel about that? And we said, perfect. So when we got with Fuji, we told him the story about Johnny V. And he says, okay, here's what, I'll do whatever you guys want me to do. And he says, and I'll be out there telling you, ordering you what to do. And we said, perfect. And then Fuji ended up really critiquing what we did. He was like our real manager. So when we were out in the ring, we'd say we wrestled the Hart Foundation or whatever, and we'd come back after 30 minutes. He'd pull us aside and he'd say, hey guys, why don't you change this up, because it didn't look like it was as vicious as this. And we listened to him. So it was, Johnny V was a great guy and everything, but he wasn't a good manager for us, where Fuji was a fantastic manager for us. And that's kind of what helped make the Demolition.
For sure. And one of the first teams you had a lot of matches with was Billy Jack Haynes and Ken Patera. How was it being in the ring with them?
Oh man, I love those guys, and growing up, I hate to say, that Ken's a lot older than I am, but growing up here in Minnesota, Ken Patera, he was kind of my guy. I loved Ken Patera. He was a heel. He was the strongest guy in the world, and I wanted to wrestle like him when I first started. So, he took the arm drags. He got slammed. He was a big guy that could work, and that's what I want to do. So when I first got got with them, and Billy Jack, and I didn't really know them very well. I knew them, and you don't really know the guys until you get in the ring and you wrestle them for a month or two, and then that's when you really become great friends. But I thought that there was going to be kind of a struggle between, you know, uh, them trying to push us to be a top tag team and coming in against the top tag team already. I thought maybe that they'd want to take advantage of us a little bit. And it ended up not being like that at all. Ken was an incredible guy to work with, and Billy Jack was unbelievable. And us being the heels, they listened to what we wanted to do for the match, and they knew that we were good guys and we weren't greedy. And Bill already knew Ken and Billy Jack, so that worked out pretty nice. So we had some great matches with those guys. Oh, I loved working with them.
So you never had any problems with Billy Jack. He seems like a nice guy, but he was a bit on edge sometimes, which he even admitted himself.
You broke up there a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Were you ever intimidated at all being in there with Billy Jack? Because he is a nice guy, but he's self-admitted that back in those days he was on edge a little bit.
Yeah, Billy was on edge all the time, but he was business with us. He was fantastic, and I never saw that side of him, and and maybe it was because you know he knew a lot of my friends, and we became friends like that. So that could have been it. You know.
And of course, you ended up beating Strike Force, Rick Martel, and Tito Santana for your long championship run. How was it winning the titles? Because they meant a lot back then, probably more than they ever have in WWE. And what was Strike Force like to work with?
Oh man, I'll tell you. You know, uh, First of all, what an honor. And what was really hard was, so we come into a new territory, and you got the greatest tag teams in the world in this territory, and the WWF is huge. That's everybody's goal, is to get there because that's where you make the money. That's that's what wrestling's all about. So when they started the Demolition, we had some heat with the guys because I'm 320 pounds and Bill's 300 pounds, and Bill's been around, top guy forever. And when we came in there, they thought, well, here's two guys that they're going to push those guys to the max and get to the top. So for the other guys, who's going to be the ones that are going to be passed up? That's kind of what their thoughts are. So it was kind of pulling teeth a little bit with some of the matches to you know get to be a top team to where we could actually go against a team to have the belts. So that was probably a year of working opening matches with people, and like like working with the Rougeaus and the Killer Bees, and these guys. We'd work programs with them, and Ken Patera, and Billy Jack. So we were kind of opening matches and middle matches, and here we're all top guys. But that's just kind of how it was. And finally, we had our break to have a championship match with these guys, and Rick Martel and Tito were, they're two of the lightest workers that you work with, but they can fly, and they've been around so long already that they know how to get you over, and they know how to get over. But they were professional enough that they let us, as the heels, call the match, and we were professional enough to, when they called something, we went along with it. And that's why when we work programs with those guys, it works so well. And when it got time for that match and we beat them, to me, that was one of my highlights, being one of the younger guys in the territory, and, being able to work with two of the best workers in the business, and win the titles from them. So that was pretty huge. And, I got to thank everybody for that, because it was You know, it, and a lot of people think you deserve this and this, but really it's a gift for you to be able to get into that position because there's so many other guys that could. So, I was very thankful for that.
I remember that one angle. I think it was on Superstars where you injured one of the Strike Force members and they were stretchered out. And as a kid, that really got you guys over to me of how devastating a team you were because they sold that injury so well.
Yeah, yeah, and that was kind of the real big point when we really became heels. That was that point when I was telling you with Mr. Fuji, and where now all of a sudden the people would think these guys are going to hurt some people.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the Rougeau. Jacques Rougeau actually told me to say hi to you when he found out I was doing this. And any memories of working with those two?
Yeah, yeah, and tell Jacques I said hi too. I really do like Jacques a lot, and Bill and I kid, you know, uh, when somebody says, who don't you like in the business, and Bill always says, well, there's one guy, Jacques Rougeau, but he really doesn't mean it. We just kind of say that. And Jacques is a great guy, and his brother, um, Raymond, we had really good matches, but sometimes you work with guys and you just clash a little bit, and that was kind of what it was. Jacques, myself, and Bill, we kind of work alike. We're trying to be the strong guys but yet try to work, where Raymond was more like, he would be the working guy of that team. So that's where it kind of clashed a little bit. But working with the Rougeaus was great, and it's funny because Jacques and I used to play golf all the time, and he was a good golfer, and uh, we played. Geez, I can't remember how many times but every time we come to a city, whenever the day it was, we didn't train. We get there early. We'd play golf. So I was good friends with Jacques, and I really like Jacques and Raymond, both great guys.
And eventually you ended up having a falling out with Mr. Fuji and feuding with the Powers of Pain. Of course, the Warlord also from Minnesota, and the Barbarian's a great guy. What did you think about working with those guys? Very similar team to you.
Well, you know, at the time, uh, Bill and I don't, we really didn't want to be baby faces, but it was kind of the crowd was changing us to that, and we really enjoyed the Mr. Fuji being our manager. So we knew it was going to be a big change, but Warlord, you can't ask for a nicer guy. He's like a giant teddy bear, and the Barbarian, the same way. So it's like it's hard for me to say anything bad about any of the guys because they're all such good guys, and they're all got families, and you work with them, and it's like you're with your best friends your whole life working, and then you got your best friends at home too. But uh, it was really good working with those guys, and it was kind of strange having Fuji on the other side because we were so used to Fuji being our manager and us listening to him that we no longer had that. So it was kind of like we were on our own. And, we used to say, he'd come up and put his hand out and he says, Grasshopper, now it's time for you to go. And that's kind of how it was. I mean, but it was a really good program with those guys. And I wish it would have lasted longer.
When you were with Mr. Fuji, did you ever witness any of his famous ribs that he would play on people?
You know, um, Fuji was Fuji was very quiet about the ribs that he pulled when he was with us. So we didn't know if Fuji really did do the rib or if Dynamite did it or if Kurt Hennig did it or um he kind of kept that from us, and I'm glad he did because you know I didn't want to have any people mad at us for a rib that Fuji would pull. So they wouldn't even ask us, did Fuji do that? Because we didn't know. So, yeah, I wasn't really around a lot of the ribs that he would do.
You mentioned Dynamite Kid. How did you get along with the Bulldogs?
Oh, got along with them great. Yeah, it really got along with them. But I got a Kurt Hennig story rib
Sure.
that you're gonna like. And this I'm sure probably he probably got this from Mr. Fuji. But one time he stopped off at this um it was a like a pet store or something, and he got these little mice that were they used them to feed snakes and everything. So he got a whole bunch of them, and they were just baby mice and just ugly, and so he came to TV, and none of us knew about this. So he came to TV, and it was at the end of the night. Uh, it was the Warrior. He put a bunch of these mice in his pants pocket. So the Warrior put his hand in his pants. And he goes, "What the?" And there are all these dead mice that were little babies that were in it, and he was just fuming. And then I think it was Sid Vicious. I don't know that for sure, but I think Sid just came in the territory, and it was the same thing. And so they didn't know. So Sid opened, and there they are. Well, Sid's going crazy, and don't quote me on that. I don't know if it was, but it was for sure the Warrior. So right away they think it's Fuji, or think it's somebody. So they go to Vince. So Vince yells out the door, "Hennig, get in here now." So Hennig goes in the office, and Vince is, yelling at Kurt, but really laughing about the rib because Vince is kind of a ribber too. But then um, Kurt ends up putting a whole bunch of these dead mice at the doorway right when he leaves the office. So all these dead mice are sitting on the floor by the door. So everybody's sitting around, and then Vince opens up the door, and he's yelling for somebody and steps in these mice. And then everybody's laughing, and right away Vince looks at Kurt, "And they get in here," and he had to go in there again. But that was Kurt, and so that was one of the ribs, but that wasn't Fuji.
How was the Ultimate Warrior backstage with you guys? I know you worked with him quite a few times. Usually, I think he was teaming with you.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, uh, he was kind of by himself a lot of times. Very serious at what he ate, what he trained. He had his own limo. He was kind of he had his own dressing room a lot of the times. Um, I got along with him very well. In fact, I traveled with him a few times and went to his house. Me and the Nasty Boys went with him one time out to his house in Arizona. So I got along with him very well, and um, working wise, it was tough to work against him because he only had certain things he could do. Uh, but he was really a good-hearted person to me, and to a lot of guys. But I don't think he got along with a lot of people because he did want to be alone, and he didn't want to really make friends with everybody because when he worked, he had to do his job, and you could have been the best worker in the world and worked with him, and he would have had to do 3 4 things to beat you with. So it was a tough job he had, but backstage he was a really good guy.
Were you surprised at how suddenly he passed away and what a coincidence it was just a couple days after he goes in the WWE Hall of Fame after feuding with them for years behind the scenes?
I was really surprised. Bill and I were at a show probably about a month before that, and it was a big. It wasn't a Comic-Con, but it was. I can't remember where it was. It was out in L.A. or something, and I wanted to go say hi to him because I didn't talk to him for probably 5 6 7 years, and I was in England, and he was there and didn't get a chance to hook up and say hi to him. So I really wanted to say hi to him there and just see how he was doing, and never got to connect with him again. And then when he was at WrestleMania, and then I heard he passed away, I couldn't believe it. And I still don't know what he died from or how he died, But I heard the last few years he wasn't a very good guy to anybody that I knew, and that was one of those deals where he wanted to be alone and not talk to any of the guys, and then I've heard from other people that it was kind of like he didn't really like wrestling. It was kind of beneath him, and it's hard to believe that when you got a guy who's making more money than anybody and ruining guys' careers by beating them and making them look bad, and you'd think he'd be nothing but good about the business. I never got a chance to talk to him uh, in the last years after I retired, and we were out in the circuit together. So
As far as Hulk Hogan, how was he behind the scenes?
who is that?
Hulk Hogan, was he easy to deal with behind the scenes? I don't think you ever wrestled him, but I'm sure you were on a lot of his cards over the years.
Oh yeah, Hulk was fantastic. Hulk was completely different than the Warrior, and um, you knew Hulk appreciated the business because he was one of the guys that made this business. And so Hulk had his own dressing room, had his own thing that he would do, and he had to do it because he was the franchise. So all the pressure was on his shoulders, commercials, meeting people, this and that and everything. You know, he was, it was a little different for him to be with the guys all the time because he always had something going on. So, but Hulk was good enough that he would come in and be with the guys all the time. So he was one of the guys. And, I wasn't, best friends with Hulk, but I was friends with him. And, I would talk to him. And, he invited me on his boat one time out in Clearwater. We went out there and, we've done a few things together, but he's always been just a really, really good guy. And, Kurt Hennig and him were good friends. And, it seemed like Hulk was friends with pretty much everybody. And, so I really like Hulk. And he had Bill and I down to his shop in Clearwater one time. And, um, you know, Jimmy Hart, where he had the hotel with Hulk. We did a signing down there for him and everything. So Hulk was a great guy. And if anybody says he's not, they probably don't know him very well.
I know you main evented a lot of the B towns when Hogan was doing the A towns. I definitely saw Demolition in a lot of main events when I was a kid. Was the pay much different if you were on the card supporting Hulk Hogan than if you were headlining one of the B towns?
Well, can you just repeat a little bit of that question again?
Yeah, sorry, I know there's a delay. They always say that the pay was better on Hulk Hogan's cards than the second show that would run the same night. But I know you guys headlined a lot of the second shows that would be wrestling on the same night as the Hulk Hogan card. Would the pay have been better as an undercard on a Hulk Hogan show or as a headliner on the B show?
Well, it always varied. And Hulk even asked us, he said, "Hey, I'd like to have you guys on our show. Would you want to do that, or you want to be on another show?" And we said, "Of course, we want to be on your show," because when you went to Hulk's shows, where he was the main event. I shouldn't call it Hulk shows, but it was he was the main event. When you went on those shows, you were usually in the big buildings where they held 20, 30,000 people. So if you were the semi-main event or um, on the card a little bit lower, usually you made some incredible money. And but if you were the main event on another show, then you did make more money. But if you were the semi-main event on the B show, then you wouldn't make as much money as you would going around the horn with Hulk being the semi-main event. But there was a few times where there was like a C show, and to me, this was the funnest time I ever had in the WWF. All the years, uh, we were the main event with the Bulldogs, and we wrestled in high schools along the East Coast. We're like in Atlantic City. We were, all different small towns along the ocean, and we spent a week just us and the Bulldogs and three other matches, and we made more money on being the main event in those matches than we ever did being the semi-main event on anybody's card. But that didn't happen all the time. So, like I say, that was just a week out of the deal. That was the C team. And I don't know what the guys made below us, but we made some incredible money. But really, to make a long story short, being on Hulk's card, being the semi-main event was the way to go.
Are you surprised that WWE is saying now that even after the lockdown ends, it's unlikely they're going to continue with house shows other than maybe Madison Square Garden house shows or some really big ones from time to time? Apparently, they're just going to phase them out, going from when you were in there having 3 house shows a night.
Boy, I just can't imagine them not having house shows. That to me, I think would be that would open up the door for all of these small organizations to do incredible. Maybe their TV that they do and their pay-per-views, they make so much money now. I don't know how all that works anymore, but they probably make so much money on their TV and pay-per-views that the house shows are probably losers for them. So that's where I would think the AEW or just local promotions would just start cleaning up, because people don't want to watch wrestling on TV. You want to go to the shows, and you want to scream and yell and throw things and have a good time. And it's like you can't do that sitting there watching TV at home. So I would think that at least they should have a C team going out and doing house shows, or a B team just to keep the house show thing going. I would think that's a big mistake.
From what I understand, they want less wear and tear on the wrestlers' bodies. And as you mentioned, apparently house shows weren't making money in some quarters. And also, I guess merchandise sales online have been higher than what they were making on house shows since the lockdown, strangely enough. So I guess that's their reasoning.
But they can say all that stuff right now. It's because there is a lockdown. The world's going to change again, where everything opens up and it's all going to be the same again. I mean, we all can't just sit home and be talking on this thing all the time. I'm going to be 400 pounds if I got to stay in the house any longer. I mean, you try to get out and you train and you do everything, but how are the guys that wrestle, once a week or twice a week, how are they going to be any good? You learn your craft wrestling in these house shows. That's where you become a good wrestler. And if they cut that out, I would really believe that the wrestling is going to go downhill fast. You're going to see matches on TV where they're going to be making mistakes, and you're going to see people getting fired and all the time. And like I say, this lockdown is not going to last. It can't. There's too many things going on in the world where you can't be scared to go around and be with people. I mean, right now, I flew out a couple of weeks ago. I was on American Airlines, and the plane was jam packed. And you're not 6 feet apart. You got a mask on the whole time. How in the world can they let American Airlines even run if this pandemic was that serious? How can Walmart have gazillions of people that are, hitting shoulders? That's how many people there were for Christmas, but then yet you close the mom and pop shop. I mean, there's no difference in the crowd going to the wrestling show than that's waiting in line at the TSA at the airport. I mean, when I was there, it was 1,000 people waiting in line, and they were not 6 feet apart. If they would have been out a half a mile from the airport. So, eventually this is going to be where everything's going to open up, and there's going to be a shot for everybody, and this is going to be just like a flu shot every year.
I sure hope you're right, and you make some valid points. I was on a packed airplane last month myself, and I was thinking the same thing. You can't visit your family at Christmas, but you could be crammed in like sardines in an airplane. But
yeah, and then you got the politicians going out and doing everything they want to do, but they tell you not to. It's terrible. We better not get into politics.
No. As far as your feud with the Brainbusters, who ended your 16-month tag team title streak, what was it like working with them? Those were NWA guys, obviously, that were really over in that territory, crossing over to WWE.
Oh, I'll tell you what, that was fantastic, because Arn Anderson, one of my best friends, and quick story with Arn, when I first got in the business, we were down in Atlanta, and he was just starting out in the business, and I was Man Mountain Darso at that time, and we had a match against the Road Warriors. So Arn and I were partners, and I never met Arn before. So we're kind of talk over the match a little bit, what we're going to do. So we get to the corner, and we walk up the steps, and I said, yeah, Arn, why don't you start? And he goes, I ain't starting. He goes, you start. You grew up with these guys. I said, well, I ain't starting. I grew up with them. I know they're freaking crowbars. They're going to kill me. He says, well, I ain't getting in there. We both stood outside the ring, and we laughed our heads off. And then it ended up starting the match. And it was a great match. But so when, and I knew, Tully was a great worker. He would, in the ring, he had a great mind. Arn was incredible, one of the greatest minds in wrestling. So working with these guys, and we're the baby faces now, Bill and I both said, you guys go ahead, call the matches however you want to do it. We'll go by, what you want to do. And they were professionals. And we had incredible matches with them. In fact, we had a 2 out of 3 deal with them on TV, where we ended up taking up the whole show. And one of the matches we had with them, I thought was one of the best matches I've had my whole life, and it was because of Arn and Tully. Now, I did get hit in the head with a chair when we lost the belts with Tully, and Tully just hammered me, and I haven't been the same since. And I know he didn't do it on purpose, but the heat of the moment, and the camera's right there, he laid it in big time, and I hurt my neck, and it's been bad ever since. But working with the Brainbusters, they're both true professionals, and great matches with them, and I really enjoyed it. And it's great working and being in the ring with one of your best friends.
What did you think about the way Tully was let go? Because he thinks it was almost a conspiracy type thing, because so many people were doing all kinds of stuff back in those days, but they seemed to single out Tully.
Yeah. Could you repeat that? You were breaking up again.
For the way that Tully was let go due to a failed drug test, he feels that it was almost a conspiracy, because there were so many people doing stuff back then, and it seemed like he was singled out. What were you thinking about that at the time?
Oh, when he left?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going on with my life, so I didn't really know. Tully wasn't one of the guys that I talked to all the time. We were friends, wrestling friends, but not friends outside the ring. So I didn't know what happened with that at all. But um, you know, Art and Tully were a great tag team, and I don't believe they were really best friends either. Um, so I don't know what the whole story was, why they left or why Tully got let go. I don't know what that situation was.
It seems like he's the only one that was ever caught for cocaine, and we all know that so many wrestlers did it back then. So it is strange.
Yeah. Being around Bill and Fuji, and I hung around with Tito Santana a lot. Um, I never knew the guys that were around doing that, so I didn't know who did it. I mean, we kind of tried to stay away from everybody, you know. So I didn't know who did drugs or didn't. And you kind of heard rumors, but I don't know what exactly that was.
That's one of the reasons why you're healthy, and so many, unfortunately, of your colleagues are gone, sadly.
Oh, it was terrible. The sleeping pills and pain pills and all that stuff. That's what killed everybody.
Now, you regained the titles shortly after losing them. I guess that was due to Tully's departure from WWE. And then you dropped them again to Andre and Haku. What was it like working with the Colossal Connection?
Oh, I'll tell you what, it was great, and thank God both of those two we were friends with. Um, Andre and Bill, they've had a friendship for years and years, and it was really great being partners with Bill and meeting Andre and becoming friends with Andre, because I used to play cards with Andre in the dressing room all the time and got pretty close with him. And then Haku, of course, we were really close with Haku. Um, and when we had the match with those guys, they actually would do anything that we wanted them to do, and we did anything that they wanted us to do. And Andre was limited. He was at the end of his career. His knees were bad, his back was bad, and he was pretty hunched over. But we would do anything for him, and we tried to do everything we could to make him look good too. And we did have uh, one of the last matches with him, but Haku was the workhorse of that tag team, and believable and incredible to work with, and as a good friend. And I loved working with those two guys. And when we took the titles from them in Toronto, um, that was out of the top 5 things that was in my career. That was one of them right there.
Yeah, I was there that night, and the crowd was going absolutely nuts when you guys took the titles. For Andre, did you ever go drinking with him or anything?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, quite a few times. But I always had to leave early so I could at least make it to the room when he was still drinking. We were in Japan one time, and we went out drinking, and oh my gosh, I thought I was going to die. And Bill's got some great stories drinking with Andre. Um, if you can imagine a 12-ounce beer looks like a little tiny cup in his hand, and he could drink 100 of those beers, where I'd be at 15 and ready to drop. So yeah, you wanted to drink with Andre just to have fun for a while and get the heck out of there. And usually he'd go through 3, 4, 5 different people. You'd leave, another guy would sit down. He'd leave, another guy'd sit down. You know, it might be 4 or 5 guys would be crawling away from him, and he'd still be going.
And for Haku, I know you weren't much of a partier, but did you ever see him in action? It seems like, for whatever reason, people like to pick fights with the toughest wrestler.
Who's that?
For Haku,
Haku?
did you ever see him in
Oh,
action in one of his famous street fights?
oh my gosh, yeah. Now, to understand Haku, Haku is the nicest guy, a total gentleman. I love him. He's just, I mean, he wouldn't hurt a flea. And we were out one night. It was Bill and I and Haku, and I don't know what town it was. It might have been Baltimore or something. But one of the girls that gives us all rides, to the airport and to different towns or whatever, just a sweetheart. She was there sitting with us, and some guy came up and said something to her and bumped into her. And Haku says, oh, please, please, just I'd appreciate it if you don't say that stuff around our friend here. And the guy said something else, and Haku, you could see the look on his face, like, did this guy just say this to me? So Haku looks at him and says, no, please, we have a lady we're sitting with, we're having a conversation. Please watch your language. And I'd really appreciate if you wouldn't say that anymore. And then the guy looked at Haku, and, you know, when you look at Haku, it was like, why would you say anything to this guy? You know, this guy says, who in the hell do you think you are? And, Haku's probably had about, 5 or 6 beers under his belt. And he looks over, and I remember Bill going, Haku. And as soon as he said that, Haku stood up and kicked that guy in the chest. And that guy flew, and I'm not exaggerating, he was off his feet and probably flew 6 feet in the air and landed. And then Haku sat down at the table like he never even missed, talking the conversation he did. And it was just like in 1 second, it was bam, doom, and that was the end of it. And thank God that guy laid there and didn't get up, and his buddies dragged him out of the room. Because if Haku had to get up and fight him, oh, I would have really felt sorry for the guy.
Yeah, that's people are crazy to mess with him.
Well,
As
yeah.
far
How do you walk in? How do you walk in a room and you look at a guy like that and go, well, yeah, I'm going to pick on that guy. you know, I suppose you think that, well, if I lose the fight, it's no big deal because I'm going to lose. But if I win, look who I beat. That's probably what the thought they got in their heads.
unless you lose a nose or an eye in the battle, that it's not really worth it.
Yeah. Yep.
Which I understand is what ended up costing Haku a lot of money when he got sued over that nose bite thing. He ended up having to pay a fortune to that guy, and unfortunately.
Yeah, I never heard about that one, but all I know is Haku is one of the nicest gentlemen around.
Oh yes, one of the nicest, but for whatever reason, people want to mess with him. It's very strange. Now, while you were still tag team champions, Crush was added to the mix. What was the reasoning for bringing Crush into the group, making you guys a threesome?
Okay, yeah, everything was going fantastic for us, and we were on uh, probably a 5-day break at home after being on the road for probably 30, 40 days. And Bill went to a Chinese restaurant and had shrimp, and him and his wife were going to the movies, and then all of a sudden his throat started swelling up. He had an allergic reaction to shrimp. So the ambulance came, everything. They got him to the hospital, and he actually did. Uh, his heart did stop for a while. It was very serious. They got him to the hospital, revived him. Everything was good. Um, so he had to stay home and get away from the business for a while. So we had, 2 months of bookings, different places. So they brought Crush in at that time to fulfill those dates because they didn't. it's kind of hard to, you know, all of a sudden when you got, 2 months of bookings and then pull one of the top tag teams out. So then they thought, well, they'll bring, another partner in, and Bill only missed a couple of nights of work. Otherwise, he ended up being our manager then. So the Demolition was still together, and that's why they put Crush in there. And Crush, I never met Crush before, but I've heard from friends of friends how good of a guy he was. So I knew we were going to get along. He was just like, he was just like we were. But he was pretty green in the ring. Didn't have a whole lot of years of wrestling, but he trained over in Japan. So, you know, he was a tough son of a gun going through their training and everything. I knew he was going to be good, but never had an experience where he'd move into a top position like that. So it was a little tough with him, but he worked out really good. And tell you, I loved Crush. We became really good friends.
And of course, you feuded with the Hart Foundation, which I remember you main evented a show here in Ottawa, Canada during that time against them. What was it like working with Brett and Anvil? And are you surprised Brett went on to have so much success?
You know, we, Jim and I we were partners in Florida, and I was really good friends, roommates with him at his house in Florida. And then I knew Brett through Jim way before that, and then being in the territory. And Brett was always really a good guy. And um, we had some incredible matches with those guys. And not because, Jim wasn't a great worker, but he was a great worker at being as big as he was. So Brett was the workhorse of the team. And that's what made the matches, because you got the big strong guy and then you got the worker guy. So Jim did what he did really good. Brett did what he did really good. So they worked different than Bill and I worked. So it ended up really, uh, really good to be a good matchup for the matches. And I loved working with those guys, because whenever you're with two of your friends and you work with them, there's always the give and take even more. Here, why don't you do this to me? Why don't you do this? There's a lot of that, and there's not a time with those guys where they wanted to be better than us or we wanted to be better than them. It was always what's going to be the best for the match. And um, that's how it was. And I still, talk to Brett, and Brett is an incredible guy. You know, when we tagged up, he really was a single guy that was into a tag. So when he went on to be the world champion and all that, he really deserved that, and he definitely um, could work to be that champion. When him and Kurt Hennig had the matches, they were some of the best matches I've ever seen in my life. It's almost like Steamboat and Flair. Then you got Kurt and Bret Hart, and when you got a guy with that much talent, he should be the world champion. And I was really proud to see that Vince gave him the opportunity to do that.
I know you lost the titles at SummerSlam 90 to the Hart Foundation. Would that have been one of your better matches, or is there one particular match of that feud that stands out to you?
It's hard to say which was your best match, because it seemed like with those guys every night was a great match. You know, it some of the best matches were with those guys, but they're all good.
And of course, after that, you had probably your best known feud with Crush, but they didn't really do it as good as they could have. It was you and Crush against the Road Warriors, who they brought in. What are your thoughts on that feud, which it never really headlined a pay-per-view to my recollection, but it was a big house show match. I know you had that match even here in my town as well.
Yeah. After working with all the greatest tag teams around, and then all of a sudden you know, Bill was sick, and then I got Crush in there, and you know, they really wanted. I think Vince really wanted to get rid of the Demolition and bring the Road Warriors in and have them be the top guys. And you know, it was hard to work with those guys, and I broke in the business with those guys. Um, because when they brought them in, I thought they brought them in the wrong way. But I had no say about it. Bill had no say about it. Crush didn't. Um, they should have never put us together. They should have kept the Road Warriors wrestling other tag teams, us wrestling other tag teams, maybe even put us all together in 8-man, you know, or 4-man tags and, you know, or 8-man tags, whatever you call it, and been actually friends with them and had them, maybe we team up together and do it. It could have been so many different angles to really build it up to where the Demolition is against the Road Warriors. And then it could have been a top pay-per-view match. But instead, it was like, you know, I believe their idea was is to kill off the Demolition by bringing the Road Warriors in and have us do jobs for them and bring them up. But the WWF fans still loved us. So it was hard to get them over at that time. And, you know, I talked to Joe about it a million times. And, you know, it was terrible how they just threw it together and they didn't want it to be the main event. Because if they wanted it to be the main event, they would have did a better angle to make it happen.
And then you look at WrestleMania 7, I think they just had Road Warriors against Power and Glory in a quick squash. And they had you and Crush. And I'm still mad about this to this day. Lose to this Japanese team that nobody had ever heard of from North America. And I was furious as a Demolition fan back then because it's like, who are these guys? They come in once and then we never hear from them again and they beat Demolition.
Yeah, and that was a big favor because we were going back and forth to Japan, and you know that was kind of that was at the end of the Demolition run, and um, and I knew one of the guys I wrestled with from Japan who was a great guy, and of course, you know, Brian and I, you know, we would do anything for anybody, and that was just our job, was to get those guys over, and it was really a terrible, you know, it was a terrible match, terrible thing, terrible place to put us in. So, but what do you do?
Yeah. It was a slap in the face to all the Demolition fans. And as you said, they could have built up the Road Warriors Demolition to there and had like a very memorable match at WrestleMania, but they wasted both of you guys
Yeah,
that WrestleMania. So I guess Crush left.
you know, and it's no, yeah, well, you know, and you never know if you got heat with somebody or if they got heat with somebody. You know, one of us could have said something wrong to the powers to be, or you know, you never know what happens in the background to where the office says, you know, screw these guys. Let's just ruin their careers, and the Road Warriors ain't ever going to get over. They're never going to get the big push anyways. Let's just throw it together. So you never know what their thought process is, you know. But that was one thing they never talked to us about, and I would have said something different than what they did.
I guess Crush left the WWE briefly shortly after that. Is that what sealed the deal on Demolition, or was he told to leave by WWE?
That right there was kind of that was the end of the Demolition, and I got really upset because it was no longer, you know, I took the business so serious and took my job so serious, and when I couldn't really do my job, that's when I ended up putting my notice in. And the same thing with Bill. And you know, Crush ended up changing, you know, and became in Crush, you know, a different character. And then after a while, I became the Repo Man. And yeah, it just when you're in the business and you're wrestling and you're just pulling teeth, it's not fun. And when it's not fun and it becomes work, then it's like, why do it?
You did have a few single matches with Kerry Von Erich when you were still Smash. How was he to work with? And were you aware that he only had one foot at that point?
Yeah, definitely. I really liked Kerry. I first met Kerry when I was in Mid South. I met him in different shows going around, and then when he came up there, I talked to him, and he remembered me, and he was really a good guy. He, had a lot of problems, and um, I when I did work with him, we had pretty good matches. Um, I talked to him a lot, and I stayed with him um, the week that he uh, died. I was with him the last night. We shared a room. I can't remember what town it was, and it was devastating to hear that he passed away. Um, he was really a good guy, real good-hearted person, and I don't think anybody hated Kerry, but terrible.
Now, I don't remember this, but according to your Wikipedia, at the SummerSlam Spectacular in '91, you played a masked character hired by Ted DiBiase and you wrestled Virgil. What was the deal there? Were they going to come up with a different gimmick for you that didn't work out?
What was that? I don't remember that one. What was that?
Oh, according to the internet, there was a show called Summer Spectacular on August 18th, 1991, where you appeared as a masked character hired by Ted DiBiase to wrestle Virgil. Do you remember that at all?
Gosh darn it. It must not have been very important because I do not remember it. And, like I say, I don't remember a lot of different things, and some things I remember better than ever. But yeah, I
Yeah,
don't remember that.
maybe they just tested it once and then decided to go with Repo Man, or I don't know. But you've wrestled so many matches, I'm sure it's hard to remember that one particular match. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I don't really remember that one.
so you put in your notice, and is that when they approached you with Repo Man?
Was I happy about it?
Oh, well, you mentioned towards the end of Smash, you put in your notice. Is that when they brought up the Repo Man character idea to you, or was that before you put in your notice?
No, when I put in my notice, I was going to leave, and then at that time, Bill kind of went his separate way. I went my separate way because he was going to Japan, and Vince asked me. He said, "Barry, do you want to stay here?" And I said, "Yeah, but I don't want to be here under these circumstances, and I'm just gonna, probably go to Japan or do whatever." And he says, "Well, hey, why don't we talk? Why don't you come up with a gimmick, and I'll try to think of something, and we'll make it happen." So I went home, and I used to repo cars for a guy that where I was bouncing at the bar. Um, he'd tell me, he'd say, "Hey Barry, I got 2 or 3 cars. Here's the keys. Go grab these. These people are late on their payments." So, I'd break into the garage and open up the garage door, and I'd take the car, the Mercedes, and I'd drive it out. Right. So I thought, well, shoot, why not have a gimmick that's a Repo Man? It's never been done. But then I thought, how about make it a little bit different so people didn't know who I was? Because when I was Demolition, um, I didn't want the same thing that happened with Randy Colley happened to me. Oh, that's the Demolition. Now he's a Repo Man. So I told Vince, I said, why don't I be the Repo Man, and I'll come up with a mask and kind of be like a guy that nobody knows who is coming in, sneaking in the garage. And I said, we'll do it really goofy to where I'll be a heel to start with, and then I'll turn babyface, and then the kids are going to love this thing, and then I'll sign autographs and go do Make-A-Wish things at hospitals and all that, and then that'll be the end of my career. So Bill says, not Bill, but Vince says, I don't know, and I said, Vince, I know I can make it happen. And I said, I'll diet down. I'll get down to about 250 pounds. Won't even recognize me. He says, you know what? Let's go for it. And the only reason why I did it was eventually I wanted to become a babyface. And I really wanted to end my career playing in golf tournaments, celebrity golf tournaments, Make-A-Wish deals, and fundraisers for people, and be the Repo Man. You take the mask off and be that guy. But it ended up happening. I ended up working with all the top guys everywhere, and then it was about time to where I told Vince, I said, Vince, I think it's time for me to change babyface. The people are kind of liking it a little bit, And I said, if I do a couple of things against some kind of heel, I said, I know I can turn babyface, and then these kids are horrified from me right now. Let's turn around. Let's let them like me, and let's sell masks, and let's do all this different stuff. He says, no, you're never going to be a babyface. I said, you're kidding me. He says, nope. He says, we're going to keep you a heel. Well, once he told me that, then I knew there was nothing left for the Repo Man, because it was too much of a gimmick that once you got beat and that was the end of it, it was, that's the end of your career. So then I put my notice in for that again. So that was the end of the Repo Man. So it started off being a great thing and ended up being a terrible thing.
Now, people absolutely love your Demolition theme, and Repo Man was also one of the memorable themes in wrestling. What was your opinion on both of those WWE theme songs that you had?
Oh, I'll tell you what, the Demolition song was incredible. In fact, when Jimmy Hart came to us, he says, hey guys, he says, I'm going to write a song for you. And we were really excited because, up there, once you get a song, you got a job, right? So we knew with Jimmy writing it too, it was going to be good. So he came back to us a couple of weeks ago and he says, here, I'm going to let you listen to the music. And he says, we got Rick Derringer's going to sing it, but here's just the music for it. So once he played the music for us, we said, that's us, and then we came out the first time with that song and nobody knew who was coming out. And when we came out, the people went frickin' nuts hearing that song. So then after, when Rick Derringer sang it, that was like, you're a top guy now because you got probably the best song out of all of the guys out there. And so it was huge. Jimmy Hart's incredible. And then when he came up with the Repo Man music, I think Stone Cold Austin ended up taking part of that for his theme. I don't know that for sure, but yeah, Jimmy Hart, unbelievable.
And you had a feud with Crush as a Repo Man. Did they put you with Crush to kind of teach him, since you were already friends with him and he needed help in the ring a little bit and he knew you were a good worker?
They probably put us together because we were friends, and I would help get Crush over. My job as the Repo Man wasn't to be a top guy. It was to help get people over, and I didn't mind doing that because I got paid well, and Crush and I got along so well. So yeah, I think it did. They did put us together to do that, and then we had the big match at Wembley Stadium, which was great. It was a short match, and he beat me out there, and that was to get him over. And it's an honor to get beat by a friend of yours. I mean, it's just I looked at it a lot different than other people because I knew I could work and I knew I could get over. And when you give me a chance to get over, I'll get over. So everybody did jobs for me, so it was time for me to do jobs for them.
And speaking of Wembley Stadium, one of your other big feuds as Repo Man was against the British Bulldog, which helped get him over before his big Wembley Stadium match. What was it like feuding with the Bulldog as a singles match?
Was that one against which one was that? That wasn't against Dynamite. That was Davey Boy,
No,
wasn't it?
that was Davey.
Yeah, that was Davey Boy. Yeah, and Davey and I were really good friends too. So yeah, anything to get, when you're working with Davey and he's the main event, one of them at WrestleMania. I mean that for the office to put that trust in you to help get a guy over, so then he could work against Bret Hart. Um, I mean, it was huge. It's like I say, I tell my son all the time that I was the luckiest guy in the world, and I really was, because of all the places I've been, all the positions I've been in, and just having the office, in the one thing that's the most important thing in your life, letting you get these guys over like that, shows that I think I was a good enough worker to be able to do that. So yeah, it was great working with Davey.
And after that, you ended up jumping over to WCW, which was just starting to pick up some steam. How did you end up signing with WCW? Who did you contact there?
Yeah, I I contacted Arn at the time, and Arn and I were best friends. So I called up Arn and I said, "Hey, Arn, do you think you can you know get me a chance, a meeting with Eric Bischoff or somebody?" And he said, "Yeah, definitely." So ended up being where he gave me the number, and then I called up Eric Bischoff, and I got a meeting with Eric. So we go in his office, and I'm sitting down with Eric, and Eric knew who I was and everything, and John Nord and I were kind of tagging up. We sold cars at the same car lot, and then we were tagging up on small shows around Minnesota and Wisconsin and everything, just having a good time. So we went into I had the meeting with Eric, and John had the meeting with Eric. And I said, John, whatever you do, do not take less than like $200,000. And I'm going to do the same thing. So, so I go in with Eric, and I said to Eric, I go, Eric, I'd like to come in, me and John Nord, and we want to be a tag team here. And he says, yeah. He says, I really don't want you to be a tag team. He says, I'd love to have you, but I don't know what I would pay you. He says, do you know what you want to get paid? And I said, yeah, I want to be paid a few $1,000,000, and I think I'm worth it. And he starts laughing. He goes, well, how can I justify that? And I said, well, why don't you just bring me in the territory? I said, I'll start training like a son of a gun. I'll be the toughest son of a gun there is. And I said, I'll beat everybody in 30 seconds. I'll beat Hulk Hogan. I'll beat everybody. And I'll be the top guy. And then I'll be worth those millions. Instead of paying me 20 million, just pay me 10 million. And then you just save 10 million. And then you got your top guy. And he laughed. He goes, that was a great answer. He says, but that ain't going to happen. And I says, well, what's your thought? He says, well, how about I pay you $175,000 and you'll just do TVs and hardly work. I said, Eric, I said, that's a great deal. But I said, am I going to be partners with John? He goes, no, you won't be partners with John. So I says, well, you know what? That's a pretty good deal. I said, I'll talk to John and I'm going to take that deal. So I talked to John. I told him that. You're kidding me. He says, I talked to him and I'm not making that much money. And I says, well, what's what's the deal? And he says, yeah, I think I'm making like 125 or something. And I says, yeah, but I asked for 20 million and then I settled for 10 million. I got 175, and we laughed. And Eric was a great guy. So that's how I started my job there.
You didn't start as the Blacktop Bully? I guess you started under your real name. Was that the plan all along, to evolve into the Blacktop Bully character, or did they kind of just throw you out there with no plans at first?
Just they just got me the job, and I had a job just to do some TVs and try to figure out what to do with me. And then, um, and at that time, I don't know who the booker was. I can't remember what it was, but then Ric Flair became the booker, and Rick says, "Yeah, we gotta think of some kind of an angle for you." And he says, "Get with Arn," and he says, "Try to come up with something." He says, "Maybe be a truck driver or something like that." So um, I called up Arn. I said, "Arn, we need to have a meeting." And he goes, "What do you mean we gotta have a meeting?" I said, "We need to have a meeting, drinking a couple of beers, and you got to come up with a gimmick for me." And he says, "Okay, let's meet over at Bobby Eaton's garage." So Arn, Bobby Eaton, and myself, we were in Bobby Eaton's garage, and we're drinking beers. And Arn always has his glasses up like this, and whenever he gets real serious, his glasses kind of come down like this, and he looks at you like this. So his glasses are up like this, and we're laughing, trying to come up with all these gimmicks, and all of a sudden, it gets real quiet, and Arn goes like this, puts his glasses down, and he looks like this, and he goes, "You're the Blacktop Bully. You're the meanest, nastiest truck driver on the road ever. You're the Blacktop Bully." And I looked at Arn and I go, "Arn, that's the greatest name of all time." I said, "I can be that guy." So I called up Rick and I said, Arn, of course, came up with the gimmick. He goes, "I'm the Blacktop Bully." He says, "That's it." So I became the Blacktop Bully. Arn came up with the gimmick. And then we were trying to figure out what to do with the gimmick. So I said, "Well, I think I need to start a feud with Ricky Steamboat or Dustin Rhodes was kind of new in the territory." And I said, "I've worked with Dustin before." So they said, "Yeah, you're going to be a fan that you're going to end up just arguing, being a loudmouth at Ricky Steamboat and with Dustin Rhodes. So you stand, you don't even come in the dressing room or anything. You get a ticket like everybody else. You go in, you're a fan. You got the front row seat. When those guys come, you just raise hell with these guys, and don't make it look like you're a wrestler or anything. And sit down when the security guard tells you to sit down." So that's kind of how the whole thing started. And then I ended up going to jail, and I was in one of the Atlanta jails, and it was brutal. And I was in there with the cup and everything. And then that's when Colonel Parker came and bailed me out of jail, and I got together with Haku, and it was that's kind of how the whole Blacktop Bully started.
Yeah, it was a great character. I really liked it, and I didn't know it was you at the time. I didn't realize it was Smash or Repo Man. I thought it was a new character.
Oh, you didn't know?
No,
You
I
didn't
was
know I was
young, but
Blacktop
it was
Bully?
before the internet. So it was a
Well,
great
I'll tell you
character.
that gimmick. Yeah, that gimmick could have went a long ways. And they were building it up just perfect and everything. And I had tagged up with different people and worked against Sting and all. It was just a fun gimmick, and I felt very comfortable with it. And then it ended up being where we ended up having uh, Dustin and I. We had feuds all over, and it ended up being where we had the truck match. And at that time, it was Mike Graham was the one who was my agent, and he put together the whole match. Mike Graham came up with the truck match, and it ended up being just a huge thing. And it was at an uncensored match, and um, we ended up having a match in a semi truck with a cage around it, and it had cow manure in there. It had pitchforks. It had hay. It had everything. And we ended up, when we got in this truck, we went on like a 60-mile path around Atlanta, and there was helicopters with cameras, trucks with cameras. I mean, this was a huge, huge thing, and it was going on during the uncensored match. So I thought this was kind of the highlight of my career, and I was going to win this match. So then I could go on, and I'm still the Blacktop Bully, and I could wrestle Steamboat, and I could, keep going on. So it ended up being, when it was all done, uh, the cameras were off, everything. I hugged Dustin. I said, Dustin, thank you. That was a lot of fun. It was huge. Thank you. I was blood from head to toe, my arms, everything. And I had to drive back from Atlanta. I was living in Charlotte. So I had all these, just coming out of the truck. I had dirty pants, dirty, manure smell. It was terrible. I ended up driving back, got home. I was all beat up. Got a couple hours of sleep. The phone rings. It's Eric Bischoff. Eric, he says, Barry, he says, what a match you had last night. I said, oh, thank you. I said, it really felt good. I said, Dustin thought it felt good and everything. He goes, I got some good news and some bad news for you. I said, oh, really? What's the good news? He says, hell of a match. Hell of a match. He says, bad news? He says, you're fired. I said, I'm fired? I said, I've never heard of anybody getting fired over having a hell of a match. He says, yeah. He says, the Tower people. He says, we weren't supposed to have any blood on that uncensored match. And I says, well, and I didn't want to stooge off Mike Graham because he told us to get blood. And actually, I got blood the hard way. I hit the cage, split the side of my head open, and my arms, there was, chicken wire in there, and I was cut. My arms were all cut up from the chicken wire. So really, I didn't bleed because I bled. I bled because it happened. So Eric says, "Please, Barry," he says, "just take the firing." He says, "Take off a little while, and I'll bring you back." And I said, Eric, I said, we're friends. You're a Minnesota guy too. I said, I definitely would do that. I said, have you talked to Dustin yet? He goes, no, I'm calling him right now. He says, I'm firing Mike Graham and I'm firing Dustin too. So I said, holy cow, who in the world gets fired over having a great match? So it ended up being where that was the end of the deal. I was living in Charlotte. I ended up moving back to Minnesota, and he called me back about a half a year later, and he says, Barry, I promised you I was going to hire you back. I'm hiring you back. So the next contract I had was for $150,000, and I didn't even work. I worked 3 or 4 times. I was Barry Darso again. I ended up helping Goldberg out. Eric said, hey, I want you to have a couple matches with Goldberg. I just brought him in. And do you mind working with him? I said, no. I said, he's an incredible guy, nice guy. So I ended up having some matches with him, had a great time, and what a gentleman he is. He's a real pro. And then they came up with this golfer gimmick for me, and just nonsense stuff. But it was really hard because I wanted to be the Blacktop Bully again, and I wanted to get a push. But then that's when the NWO was there, and that was the top thing, and there was nothing that was going to be better than that. So after my contract was up, then that was the end of my career at that time.
But the pay was pretty good, and you didn't have to do much for those 3 years. What do you think you wrestled on average for those 3 years to make 150 grand a year?
Could you repeat that again? You broke up.
Okay, you mentioned you were making 150 grand a year. How many matches on average do you think you wrestled a year to make that in those last 3 years in WCW?
Oh, that was the best pay I ever had. I think I worked. I probably had 5 matches for $150,000. I showed up at every TV. I was there all the time. I bet I probably had about 5 matches for $150,000.
I'm surprised they didn't do more with the golfer gimmick, because that was funny and people liked it. But I guess after those 3 years were up, they just didn't re-sign you.
No, no. In fact, my last year, I think I made 107. Or no, I made $75,000 in like my last contract. It was just to keep me around, which I loved having the money. I didn't do anything. I never traveled or did anything, but I was always the guy that wanted to work for my money, and at that time it was just like, yeah, it's over with. That's it.
Is there any match from that last WCW run that stands out to you?
Um, I had some really good matches. Yeah, one that really stands out. I worked with Benoit. Um, I really liked working with Chris Benoit. Um, Steamboat, worked with Steamboat. Um, but nothing. What was hard was I was used to being a top guy, and all of a sudden now you're in the middle and below, and the matches didn't mean as much. It was almost like they put you together because they knew you were going to have a good match, but it didn't mean anything. And then you did a job for those guys because that's what your job was. Um, yeah, I suppose working with the boss man too was kind of fun, but nothing really stands out. It was just like you know it's like a guy going to work every day at a factory, and he punches in and he goes out there and he sweeps floors and does a couple of things for money and tries to figure out how to get the 8-hour day done now. That's kind of what my job was. It was like, how can I just finish this day and get out of here? So, that's kind of the feeling it was.
How was the dressing room environment in those days? You always hear the horror stories that there was cliques and there was a lot of tension. But I guess if you weren't one of the top guys, they may not have seen you as a threat. So it may have been just relaxed for you.
Oh, it was great for me because I was out of the mix of things. But yeah, there was clicks all the time. Oh man, was there clicks. Um, I can remember one time. Geez, it's hard to remember, but Orndorff came in. He was one of the bosses, and Orndorff told Vader. He said, "Vader, it's time to go. You're on in like 10 minutes or whatever." And Vader says, screw you. I'll get ready. And Orndorff says, no, you got to get ready now. You got to be out there. And Vader says, fuck you, whatever it was. Well, you could see Orndorff's face just get beat red, and it was like, oh. Well, he went out and beat the living crap out of him, and it was just, there was some stress going on around there, and but yeah, there was the certain clicks, and I'm just glad I was in a clique that wasn't a clique that somebody hated. I got along with everybody, you know.
Do you ever plan on writing a book about your career? It's so extensive. It might have to be 500 pages.
Oh man, if I could remember all the years of everything that I've done from the very beginning to the end, it was huge. There's so many things on these stories here that I'm missing. That, like I say, I've had the greatest life in the world. I've been all over the world. I've been with my friends every night. I learned a trade that was fantastic. It and it just it was a good time. And now I'm at another part of my life that I'm retired. I sold my company, and now I go on the road and do sign autographs with Bill, and we get to talk to the fans and meet the fans, and it's huge. And without the fans, there wouldn't have ever been the Demolition. But and talking to you, it's huge.
Do you think you're ever going to be in the WWE Hall of Fame? I mean, you should have been in there a long time ago, but for whatever reason, they don't seem to want to put you in there.
You know, it's really strange. And, um, you know, I honestly don't know why or whatever. And, you know, and maybe it's just, maybe we just don't deserve to be in it. But, um, you know, I don't think I got heat with anybody. I think I've done everything right. So, you know, it'd be an honor to get in, but, you know, it is a work. Um, Wrestling now isn't the most important thing in my life. You know, after WCW and getting paid to do nothing and phasing myself out and everything, it's like I I got out of it. I started my own life. I'm really close to my wife and my you know my son lives in another state with some grandkids, and I'm getting ready to move there. That's kind of the most important part of my life. So I don't know if I have a beef with somebody, but you know, the office never calls me. The only calls I ever got was, you know, to be in the other WrestleMania one time, and that was, you know, how many years ago? 7, 8 years ago. Other than that, I don't talk to anybody in the office. Um, when Arn was up there, I never talked to Arn. He was busy all the time. I'm going to do Arn's podcast coming up here sometime. He texted me not too long ago and wanted me to do that this year. So, yeah, Hall of Fame. Who knows what's going to happen?
There were some fans that wanted me to ask you if you knew whatever happened to Demolition Blast, which was one of the guys that was used, I think, with Bill on the independent scene.
Yeah, you know, I never knew him. That was Bill created Blast. So, yeah, I never knew Blaster at that time. In fact, I wasn't even out wrestling at all. I took probably 10 years where I didn't even get in the ring or do anything.
I see. And at one point, your son was wrestling, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah. He signed with the WWE, and he went down to the training camp down in Florida. Had a great time. Dusty was in charge down there. Norman Smiley really helped him out down there, and Doc helped him. Pritchard. So he was down there for probably about 6 months. He was under contract, and you know he was real lean and was just starting to learn how to work. And he ended up having a match with Drew McIntyre, and Drew McIntyre gave him a clothesline coming off the second rope or something like that. And Dakota got a concussion. So then they had him sit out, and he failed his first concussion test coming back, and then he had a second concussion test that he passed. And then when he came back, Johnny Ace told him, he says, "Hey, just take it easy." He says, "You got about 2, 3 months left of your contract, and we're not going to re-sign you." So Dakota called me up and he says, "Hey, Dad, what do I do?" You know, and I says, "Well, you need to try to get into Impact Wrestling, and you know, now that you've learned how to wrestle that way." And I've seen him have matches with guys that were incredible, but on TV and everything, he didn't quite know where he was or what to do. So he ended up talking to Hulk, and Hulk uh, ended up getting him a job, him and Eric Bischoff. So he started working for Impact Wrestling, and he was just a skinny kid who now was just starting to grow and learn how to work. And he had a match on TV one day, and he called me up. He goes, "Dad," he goes, "I don't even want to hear it." He says, "It was terrible." He says, "What do I do?" You know, and I said, "Well, first of all, you have to you have to do the best for what you can do." And I said, "This is terrible about this business, but you got to look out for yourself now. Quit trying to have a match to make the match look good. Make yourself look good because you're on TV and you're fighting for a job." So he says, well, I got a good match next week. He says, let me know how I do. So I watched the match. He was like a completely different person. Unbelievable match he had. He took charge. He controlled the match. He looked like he's wrestled for a while. He calls me up. He says, so Dad, I said, son, I'm proud of you. I said, you finally did it. Now take that as a guideline, and that's how you need to do it. So then at that time, right when this was happening, was when Hulk was leaving, and Hulk came up to Dakota and said, Dakota, he says, you need to, he said, you need to um, find another job. He says, because I'm leaving, and he says, it's going to be tough to have a job here. So uh, Dakota called me up. He said, Dad, what do I do? I said, son, I said, now is the time to take your wife and your kid. And I said, you need to move, go back and finish your school and get out of this business. And he took my advice, and he went up and went through the police academy up in Michigan. And boy, I'll tell you, he's what a great kid. He had his family living in Thompsonville, Michigan. He went back and forth to Roscommon, Michigan, which was almost an hour and a half away. Went to school, paid for the school himself. He had to, for the sheriff's department, go to the police academy, so he had to pay for all that. Went back and forth, kept the family going. Finally finished school. He was like number one in his class. Had job offers around Michigan. Finally, he ended up settling for Roscommon, Michigan. He's a deputy for the sheriff's department there. Moved his family there, bought a house, and great kid, great work ethic, and I am so glad he got out of the business when he did. And he could have hung on, and he could have. I think he could have really got good. And I always told him, I said, you watch Shawn Michaels, you become Shawn Michaels, but yourself. Do what he does, change it up a little bit, because Shawn Michaels was one of the best workers in this business. And he wasn't a big guy, but good looking guy. And that's what Dakota started doing. When he started really becoming a man, he started getting some biceps and triceps and legs and, chest. And that was right when he got out of the business. So good for him. He got out of the business, and he's doing really well.
That's great to hear. And speaking of Shawn Michaels, I forgot to ask you earlier, any memories of working with the Rockers?
Oh my gosh, yeah. When we probably had a dozen matches with those guys. And when we worked with those guys, we were the big guys, they were the smaller guys. And it was like that was a dream come true to work with those guys, the Demolition, because they would sell, and we'd do our job by beating them up. The girls would go crazy over these guys because you're beating them up, and they'd almost have tears in their eyes crying. And then all of a sudden, we'd slip on a banana peeling, and they'd make the comeback. And when they made the comeback, the crowd would absolutely lose their minds. And the easiest matches ever with those guys. And when they beat us or when we beat them, it meant so much to those matches, because Marty could work and Shawn could work, and they were fantastic. And it'd be nice to see all these guys again on the road, and I can't wait some of the shows I will.
And as far as Road Warrior Animal's sudden passing this year, I know you guys were very close, and I know it came out of nowhere. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, and Bill and I talk about it a lot. That was one that, well, there's been quite a few that shock you, but for some reason that one really hit home, because we were just with Animal just a few weeks before that, and he was doing a lot of signings, and a lot of the people he was doing signings with, we would do with. So when he passed away, it really was like, holy cow, because he was in good shape. I didn't know that anything was wrong with him or anything, and it was so sudden. And when it happened, Kevin Kelly, Nails, he was another one from Minnesota who grew up here and was in the business. And I talked to him every once in a while, and what a shock. We couldn't believe it. And just being married with his wife, and they were celebrating their marriage, and then he died that night. It was terrible.
What's Nails been up to? I've been trying to track him down for years. Maybe I could get his number off you later.
Yeah. Who's that, Kevin?
Yeah, no one's heard from him in the wrestling business in like 20 or 30 years. What's he up to?
Yeah, he doesn't like doesn't, or I should say, he doesn't want to do interviews or any of that stuff. He's a real private person. He's another one of the guys that is, when you're friends with him, he's just the nicest guy. He's a real hard worker. He owns his own business, works 24 hours a day, and just likes to stay away from the wrestling business. And one day he's going to get out there and go on somebody's going to pay him, and he'll go out there and work one of the Comic Cons or do something. I don't know if he would do a interview like this on a tape. I could talk to him, but he's
I'll
a very private person.
We're in Minnesota. I'll let you know if I'm ever in Minnesota, and maybe we'll do that autograph deal with you at the same time. But as you said, you don't know what type of guy he is. And as far as what type of business
he sells trailers. The big pull behind trailers. He owns a whole bunch of them and sells them, and does all that stuff. So good guy.
What was the whole deal with him and Vince, where he allegedly choked Vince, and that's what led to him departing from WWE, because he was getting that huge push? I don't even know if he ever lost before he departed.
Yeah, I don't know, and respecting him, I don't really want to say everything about all that stuff. But when that happened, I was in the same town as him, and I didn't know anything about it. All I heard was, "Hey, did you hear what happened? Nails choked Vince out," and I said, "Holy cow!" And that was, I've never asked Kevin about it. It's just something that he's done, and I like I say, I don't know a whole lot about it.
Do you stay in contact at all with Greg Gagne?
Yeah, I just talked to Greg not too long ago. We don't talk all the time, but yeah, Greg's a great guy. He called me probably, I'd say probably about 4 months ago or so, and asked me if I wanted to, do a few things with him, and I told him yes. So yeah, Greg's a great guy, and he's here in Minnesota, and he does a few personal appearances in different places.
So he's pretty much retired now, I would assume. Is he retired? Is he retired from his shoot job?
No, he still sells cars at a dealership around.
Okay. And as far as today's wrestling product, do you follow it at all?
I don't follow it. I hear things, and I see some different commercial, everything. And the few times that I have watched it, the guys are phenomenal, but it just seems like, being TV, it's nonstop. There's no holds. There's no, if somebody hurts their knee, they don't really hurt their knee. You work on the arm, you really don't hurt the arm. That's what I've noticed that's different, at least the ones that I've seen. And the tag teams, it just seems like they just throw a couple of guys together, so it's not really a tag team show. I suppose it's just to get four guys TV time is what it is. But yeah, I don't really follow it. But from what I hear, the guys are incredible athletes.
What would you do to bring wrestling back to the popularity where it was in, let's say, the late 80s or the late 90s? It hasn't had a boom like that in about 20 years. You've been around for decades. What are a couple suggestions you might have for promoters out here that might be watching?
I think what wrestling always boils down to is wrestling. If you can get back to the old school of wrestling where you have a match that tells a story, but with nowadays where you got to speed the match up a little bit, that's the way that you're going to have a territory go again. I think all the interviews that you have during a wrestling show is too much. I think when it all boils down to is the story's got to be in the matches. And I think if there was going to be a TV show and you had the old school wrestling with the athletes that you have now, and you can tell a story and have the announcer tell the story, I think that's what's going to have another territory. And if the WWE is not going to run towns anymore, if there's another television show out there where the matches are in the towns, and it doesn't have to be 20,000 seat buildings, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 seat buildings, I think that with a good TV show and good talent on there, you're going to sell those places out as long as you got good angles and you're not charging $1 million a person to come in there. And I think the way the WWF used to do it, when we ran the shows, we would fly into Chicago. So the whole crew would fly into Chicago, and you had that cost of all the plane tickets going there. Well, you would wrestle in towns that were less than 200 miles from that place. So say you would wrestle in Detroit. Then that night you'd drive back to Chicago. Then you'd fly, then you'd go to Rockford the next night. Then you'd go back to Chicago. Then you go to Fort Wayne, Indiana. You go back to Chicago. So all the guys were paying for the travel, except for that one plane ticket in and another one out. So it didn't cost much money to run those house shows back then. And then they wouldn't pay the opening matches. Really, they didn't pay the guys a whole lot of money except for the main events and semi-main events. So if you had a TV show like, say, AEW, and they could run the territory like that used to be, where you could have these house shows, and that's what pays for all the guys, and that's where they learn their craft and their how they can work again. And you can work angles with guys in practice in those towns, so when you get to TV, you have TV matches that are just incredible. That's how I think you could make this wrestling happen again.
And I interviewed the Metal Maniac a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember him, but he told a story that you were on a Middle East trip with him that ended up being a nightmare. Do you recall that trip at all?
Oh yeah, I remember that trip. Yeah. We ended up going to Beirut, and we were supposed to have a few matches and make some pretty good money, but we ended up getting paid half the money, and we stayed in a hotel where there was a hole in the wall from a bomb that went off not too long ago. And I can remember it was him and me, Jimmy Snuka. Who else was there? Anyways, we were out on the dock, out on the ocean, and they were shooting missiles off right about 5 blocks at us at planes that were going by. So we were kind of, it wasn't in a war, but it was kind of a friendly war. And when we ended up leaving, we were stuck in the airport for about 2 days. There was a red alert where they were worried that the war was going to start in Beirut again. So we were stuck at the airport for about 2 hours. But it ended up being a good trip. We had good food, good everything, and you know, yeah. But it was a nightmare. It could have went bad.
And he mentioned there was 2 guys that nobody wanted to wrestle, and eventually you were the one that volunteered to get in there because these guys were huge and green, and then you and Warlord, I think, ended up just beating them up or something like that.
Well, yeah, it ended up being there were 2 local guys that never worked a lick, and we're Americans in Beirut, and thank God uh, we had soldiers that were with us the whole time, and we didn't want to beat these guys up too bad because we didn't want the crowd to jump on us and kill us. But I thought, yeah, what the heck. Yeah, we volunteered and wrestled them, and everything ended up working out good. So it was just another experience to top off the career.
Would that have been one of the scariest trips you went on with all those missiles, or was there anything worse than that?
Now, to me, that was probably the one, but actually it was nothing compared to having a match and having a riot start where you're fighting for your life to get out of the ring. That was worse than this.
So where can people follow you if they want to look you up on social media, or if they want to book you for an autograph appearance or something like that once this lockdown ends?
I'm at Real Demo Smash, and I watch it a lot, but I don't answer everything that's on there. Yeah, usually different promoters are the ones that call us up and book us on the trip. So I don't really give my number out to anybody because I don't know where I'm going to be. And in fact, I used to get a lot of fan mail at my office, but I'm not there anymore. So whoever sends that fan mail out, um, I may not get that. It might end up going back, or the post office might have it at their place because I know the new owners haven't been getting any of it. So all of a sudden it stops. So I don't know if it's being returned. Because some people used to send a lot of pictures and then I'd sign them and send them back. But don't do that anymore because I don't know where it's going to be, and you can't send it to my house here either because I'm moving out of here and moving to a new place. So really, if you can just look us up when we're coming to the town and come and see us at some of the signings, that would be the way to go. But yeah, at Real Demo Smash if for bookings.
And finally, how's Bill doing these days?
Pardon me?
How's Bill doing these days?
Oh, Bill's doing fantastic. Bill is actually he works 3 days a week at the school he teaches, and he actually set up the program that he teaches. So he's at the end of his teaching career at the place where he's at. So when he created this program for these kids, he goes in there and he uh, he can kind of come and go as he pleases, and he's just a great guy wanting to still do this. And every time I see him, I say, Bill, when are you going to quit? Oh, it'll be the end of this year. And he's been saying that for 10 years. But yeah, Bill is doing really good, very healthy, spends a lot of time with the family and grandkids.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do both the part 1 and part 2 of this. I hope to see you in person down the road once things open up a little bit more, and maybe do one of these online autograph sessions down the road. But is there anything you want to say here? I'll let you wrap it up with the fans.
Yeah, I just want to say, thank you for having me on, and thank all the fans and everything, for following the Demolition. Like I said, I've been the luckiest guy in the world. I'm very thankful for everything. I just hope to see everybody at some of the shows, because what's nice now is we can actually sit down and talk to you, and carry on a conversation. When we were wrestling, and we couldn't do any of that, so it's nice to travel around and do all that stuff. So thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.